Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review. Today I'm talking about the latest installment in the iconic action franchise, Rambo: Last Blood. Now this is a movie I didn't think needed to exist. In fact, when they finally officially announced it, I was really bummed that they did, because like I mentioned in my Rambo 4 review I did just recently, I thought the ending to that movie was the perfect ending to the series and the perfect send-off to John Rambo. There's nowhere else to go and you didn't really need to do anything else with it. So the question going into this movie was it going to be worth it, or was it just going to be an unnecessary add-on to your series that should have ended in one movie ago? And it's kind of both. Because on one hand, this is kind of a disappointing Rambo movie, because it doesn't really feel like one. From the setting, which is totally different from the other movies, and even the story and stuff, it just doesn't, like I said, have that Rambo feel to it until the third act, where it goes full Rambo, and it's pretty amazing. But aside from that, taking this movie as a, trashy, grindhouse, old-school revenge movie, it's pretty entertaining, and I honestly had a really good time with it. So it's kind of a weird double-edged sword where it's it kind of disappoints on certain aspects, but it's still a very entertaining action flick. So this movie begins 10 years after the last one, and Rambo is living on his ranch, all peaceful and quietly, with this older woman whose granddaughter has basically become Rambo's niece. And he's almost become a surrogate father to her, because her real father was this piece of crap who left her when she was really little, right after her mom died of cancer. But she still wants to find him and find answers and ask him why he did that, why he left him. And she ends up finding out that he's across the border in Mexico and she wants to go over there, but Rambo warns her against it. He doesn't want her to because it's dangerous, doesn't want anything to happen to her. But of course, she doesn't listen, goes over there, ends up getting captured and being sold into this sex trafficking ring, and Rambo has to go over there and rescue her. So yeah, the plot of the movie is very generic, it's nothing special, nothing unique. But to be honest, that's not really my problem with it, because I don't really go into a Rambo sequel expecting a really good plot, so that doesn't really bother me too much. I mean, okay, the whole reason for this type of plot is obviously to do a cheaper movie, because this movie feels cheaper than even the last one, which was already kind of feeling cheaper compared to the previous ones. But you can clearly tell that was kind of done as a cost-cutting thing to make an easier movie, not, a little less costly. But I kind of appreciate it, because you could have gone either way. You could have done this, or you could have done the very stereotypical, you could have had Rambo living on his farm, all happy, and then have some sort of military colonel come up to him and be like, hey, we have this mission we need to go to, and I know you're the best of the best, and then he reluctantly agrees to do so. They could have easily have done that and just did a rehash of the other previous sequels, but they didn't do that, so I appreciate it. And I like some of the elements of this, even though like I said it feels different. I like seeing Rambo on his farm being happy for once, because Rambo's never happy. He's always just stone-faced, just dead inside. And in this one he has a sense of hope, and that's his niece and everything. And it was nice seeing that. It was nice seeing him have dialogue, because he never barely speaks in the previous movies. So he had a lot of dialogue in the first act, and that's kind of weird, but I like that. I like seeing that. And as the movie progresses, I didn't care for him. I did care for him to find his niece, and I wanted to succeed. Stallone does a really good job, despite his age. You think oh man, he's in his early 70s. How could he do this type of movie? But he pulls it off very well. He's believable in the action scenes, and still gives a really good performance as John Rambo. But the problem with the plot in this movie is the structure. Because the structure is kind of off, which throws off the pacing a little bit, because there's a lot of setup. The first act of this movie has a lot of setup, and that's not a bad thing. You need that in order to make us care about these characters who are seeing for the first time in this movie, But the second act is very kind of truncated and very fast, and I felt like it could have used a bit more. Could have had a bit more plot, a bit more kind of character development stuff to make the movie a little bit meatier. And that second act almost feels like there's not even a second act. And I feel like that kind of throws things off, because you have this first act full of build-up and these scenes of just following his niece in Mexico, finding her father and stuff. But then you get to Rambo going into Mexico. It happens really fast. And you're well, I wanted to see more of that, as opposed to his niece hanging out in Mexico. And the villains in the movie are pretty bland. There are these two brothers who run this drug cartel, and they're kind of your stereotypical, like, bad guys. There's a couple of scenes of them, like, being evil and kind of, like, hitting around, like, the girls and the sex trafficking thing and stuff like that. But there's not a whole lot of them, and when you do see them, they're kind of boring. So there's nothing really special about the bad guys. They're very forgettable, which does kind of fit in with some of the previous Rambo movies. They have pretty bland villains, but just had to bring that up. It was kind of, you know, eh. Now, what this movie does deliver on is violence. It delivers on that in spades. Like, this movie is so violent and over the top and just gory. I will say, though, I do think the violence in Rambo 4 is more brutal. I think it's because it was trying to be a bit more realistic, and you could tell there's more of a message behind the violence in that. Like Stallone was trying to, like, say something about the bad stuff that was going on in Burma and all that kind of stuff. In this movie, it just kind of comes off as, like, crazy, cheesy, over-the-top violence, if that makes any sense. So it doesn't quite have the brutality of Rambo 4, except for one scene in the middle there, where he's interrogating this one dude, basically, and that scene, Jesus Christ, oh god, that moment was insane. Aside from that, though, most of the action is just over-the-top, like heads exploding and people being impaled on stuff, and how he takes out the main bad guy at the end was, oh my god, I had a few people in my audience cheering, actually, at that moment. It was pretty great, pretty excessive, but like I said, more of a over-the-top, like, exploitation-y level, which, again, is kind of like a weird double-edged sword where they kind of moves the movie even farther from what First Blood was, which was a very minimal violent movie, to turn this as kind of over-the-top carnage. But I was entertained by it, so I can't really complain too much. It's kind of weird. But yeah, the action in this movie is pretty good. Like, when the action hits, it really hits. And probably one of the most violent movies I've seen recently. Like, this one, it doesn't hold back, and it's all the better for it. That stuff was great, because you get to the climax of this movie, and it's all that stuff you see in the trailers of those guys running around tunnels and getting taken out by, like, booby traps. That's the climax of the movie. That's the whole thing. And it's fantastic. Like, you've seen that in the previous Rambo movies. That's my favorite part of the previous Rambo movies, and it's one element that the fourth movie was missing, so I'm really glad this has it. But you see those in the previous movies, and he does that with very minimal time and not too much prep time to get that stuff done. So imagine him having a whole day of prep time. That's the ending of this movie, so it goes even further and even more ridiculous. It's basically Home Alone, but with Rambo. And I got no problem with that. I love that stuff. It's pretty great. And I like how this movie does delve into Rambo's PTSD a little bit. Not too much, it's very surface level, but compared to like the previous sequels that really didn't bring it up at all, it's nice to see some of that in here. Like, you see that he's constantly taking medicine, like taking pills and stuff, and there's a couple moments where he has kind of flashes back to like Vietnam and stuff. So I like that they added those little bits in there. It was kind of nice to kind of go back to some of those elements from First Blood that weren't present in the other sequels. Now I'm going to talk about something spoiler-wise. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to have anything spoiled for you, don't watch on to this point. I want to talk about the ending. So I'm going to mention something that's spoiler-ish, even though it kind of isn't since Stallone spoiled it months ago. But whatever, spoiler warning. Here we go. At the end of the movie, Rambo does not die. Which, again, we knew that because Stallone mentioned a few months ago that, like, if this movie's successful, he'll want to do more. Why? But either way, I was actually kind of bummed that he didn't, because with the way the movie ended, I thought it would have been a very satisfying death for Rambo. Like, I thought it would have worked, and I thought it would have been really good, because at the end of the movie, you know, he's taking out all of the drug cartel, and he basically blows up the tunnels, leaving, like, his entire, like, ranch just, like, in ruins. You know, just smoke coming up, just dirt everywhere. And you see him, he gets, like, wounded really badly. It almost feels like they were planning to kill him at the end, but at the last minute, Stallone's like, no, I might want to do another one. So they tweaked it to where he didn't die. Because you see him, he gets shot in the stomach and everything. He gets hit somewhere else, I forgot where else. And he's walking around, he's wounded, he's bleeding out. And there's this really great moment where he walks up the steps of his house, sits on this rocking chair, and just kind of sits back amongst like the ruin of his ranch, of his home. You know? And I thought that would have been a very kind of poetic, in a dark way, like ending for the character. Because it's like, you know, he came back home, but, you know, the war still came back to him, and even to his home, and even destroyed his home in this fight. I don't know, it kind of, I thought it would have been kind of an interesting, like I said, like poetic, like darkly poetic death for him. And it would have been a great moment of him just kind of holding his side, sitting on the rocking chair, rocking back and forth, and then just, you know, just stops. I honestly thought that would have been a very satisfying end to the character. I thought it would have been really good. But, you know, of course, the camera pans back and he keeps rocking. He has that, like, monologue about, like, I'm going to keep on fighting to keep the memories of the lost ones alive. I'm like, eh. And then it cut to credits. And I was like, okay, you know what? If this movie doesn't get a sequel, in my mind, he died right after that moment. That's how it's going to be. That's how it's going to be canon in my mind. You know, I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then the credits start, and you see this, like, montage of the previous movies, which I thought was really cool. I really liked that. And then it starts showing clips from the recent one, and at the end you see that shot of him on their chair, and then it cuts to a new scene of him getting on this horse and riding off, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Well, there goes my, like, own headcanon right there. And it kind of bummed me out. I'm like, why'd you have to do that? Like, I don't know, I just thought they should have killed him. I mean, the movie's called Last Blood. Like, why would you call the movie Last Blood if you want to do another sequel? I think that's really dumb. So, I wish they would have killed him at the end. I wish they easily could have, with how the movie is, just had him on a rocking chair and just had him stop breathing. So Rambo Last Blood is a very brutal, bloody, over-the-top action movie that I was thoroughly entertained by, despite the fact that its shift in setting and shift in story kind of makes it not feel like a Rambo movie, makes it feel distant from the other films. I do feel like with a better script and a bigger budget, this movie actually really could have worked, even with its type of storyline of, you know, him being at home and him, like, going into Mexico and stuff like that. I still feel like that could have really worked with a better script, and they could have had more unique action sequences, like him on a horse or something like that, because, you know, he does have horses on his barn and stuff like that, and I just feel like there could have been more opportunities to tell them, like, a better fleshed out story and have more unique action scenes and more interesting set pieces if it had a better script. But as it stands, it's still a very, like, fun, streamlined, over-the-top action movie that is pretty entertaining despite its, you know, lack of, like, really great Rambo-isms and really good feel of the Rambo movies. Still nice to see Stallone back again, just to see him in general starring in an action movie like this. It's nice seeing the character back one last time, hopefully one last time, because we don't need any more, and we don't really need a Rambo 6. Just leave it at this, and just let it be. Please, Stallone. So that's all I have to say about Rambo Last Blood, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.